Okay, let's unpack this. When trust is shattered in a relationship, the fallout can feel, well, absolutely catastrophic.
It really can.
It's not just a relationship issue, is it? For the people involved, it can become this deeply personal crisis that just upends their entire world.
Exactly. And, it's fascinating how the impact of betrayal mirrors other major losses in life, yet it carries its own unique complexities.
Hmm.
Our deep dive today is really about exploring a comprehensive, empathetic guide to understanding and coping with all those challenges, emotional, psychological, practical, that come up.
Right.
The mission, really, is to give you a clear roadmap through what can be a really confusing and painful time. And that raises a big question, doesn't it? How do we even start to define something so deeply personal? And maybe more importantly, how do we heal from it?
It's interesting you bring up the definition because I think for many people that's where the confusion starts. What is infidelity, really? Most of us probably default to thinking, it's purely physical intimacy outside the relationship.
That's the common assumption.
But it turns out the lines are often far blurrier. We've seen that feelings of hurt and betrayal can be just as intense when someone discovers their partner has been having, say, secret, regular coffee dates. Just coffee.
Absolutely. It's about the secrecy, the broken trust.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, when people were asked to define an extramarital affair, a significant chunk didn't even mention sex. Many included things like just thinking about an involvement or dinner and drinks, even kissing and petting. Only about a quarter saw it as strictly sexual intercourse.
It's quite revealing.
So the real takeaway here seems to be infidelity isn't just about what happens, physically. It's often this profound violation of emotional boundaries.
And that's often where the deepest wounds are formed.
Yeah.
And while the definition might vary, you hear people describe the aftermath as feeling, well, worse than losing a partner through death.
Worse than death. Wow.
Think about it. Relationships can survive death, in a way, through cherished memories, right? But after infidelity, the core of the relationship itself feels inherently unstable. It typically takes one of three immediate paths. Either the affair is ignored and maybe continues, or repeats and nothing really changes.
Swept under the rug, basically.
Pretty much. Or the relationship ends entirely. That's the second path. Or third, the affair stops and the old relationship kind of discontinues. This opens the door for the difficult but maybe transformative work of forming a new relationship together.
And that initial discovery, you use the word catastrophic.
Like it often is.
Describe that moment. The immediate feelings are often this visceral torrent of denial, anger, profound betrayal.
Yeah, it's like a switch flips in your brain.
And it triggers all sorts of physical and behavioral reactions, right? Like excessive drinking or eating, maybe smoking, severe disruptions in sleep patterns.
Making it incredibly difficult just to function day to day. Your thought processes, your focus, everything can be affected.
So beyond that immediate shock, you mentioned infidelity brings this cascade of other losses, often hidden ones.
Yes, exactly. The most obvious is that profound loss of trust. Trust is so fundamental, isn't it? It's earned over time. And restoring it depends on so many things. Personal values, the betrayer's willingness to genuinely re-earn it is a huge challenge.
And what else? Beyond trust.
Then there's the loss of security. And that's both emotional safety and practical things, worries about shared property, lifestyle changes.
That makes sense. The immediate emotional shock is just the tip of the iceberg then. What are some of those deeper things people grieve? Maybe the ones they don't even realize at first.
Absolutely. There's the crushing loss of hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
The visions you had of raising children together, shared future plans, even just growing old side by side, all that feels shattered.
Yeah, the future you thought you had, gone.
Right. And for many, there's also a significant loss of faith. That could be spiritual faith, asking, why me? Or just a more general loss of faith in life itself. Like, the world suddenly feels unsafe.
I can see that.
And the loss of intimacy and affection often leads to this profound loneliness, which, unfortunately, can sometimes push people into making hasty, maybe regrettable decisions in future relationships just to fill that void.
Trying to numb the pain, maybe?
Possibly. And perhaps one of the most common yet insidious losses is self-esteem. It's that really painful self-reproach where you start blaming yourself.
If only I'd.
Exactly. If only I'd done more, or maybe if I'd looked after myself better. You start viewing your partner's choice as somehow a reflection of your own inadequacy.
That's a staggering number of losses to deal with. I imagine listeners hearing this might think, okay, but how do I even begin to identify or process all of that? What insights do we have on acknowledging these really complex feelings?
Well, that's the absolutely crucial first step, recognizing that all these feelings, the anger, the sadness, the fear, the confusion, they're normal. They're neither right nor wrong. Just acknowledging them is paramount.
So don't try to push them away.
Exactly. Denying them can actually be more harmful in the long run than simply letting yourself feel them. Allow yourself that space. And importantly, if your feelings are overwhelming, or if you're having strong physical reactions like panic attacks or severe sleep loss when reminded of the infidelity, then consulting a doctor should be a priority. Don't hesitate.
This journey sounds incredibly difficult. For someone right in the thick of it, the immediate thought must be, how do I even begin to cope? How do I just get through the next hour, the next day, or what practical strategies are there?
Right. The immediate guidance really focuses on stabilizing yourself during this turbulent period. First, and this is key, don't make any major life-altering decisions right away.
Like ending it or selling the house?
Exactly. This isn't the time for snap judgments. It's a time for reflection, not reaction. Instead, the focus needs to be squarely on self-care. So do address any physical reactions you're having, the disrupted sleep, changes in appetite.
Get help if you need it.
Definitely reach out to a doctor if those things persist. And perhaps most importantly, allow yourself to fully experience your emotions.
Even the messy ones.
Especially the messy ones. Laughter and tears are both part of this process. Sometimes, even encouraging tears by looking at old photos or listening to certain songs can be helpful just to release that pent-up emotion.
That's such crucial advice. It almost sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? To do nothing drastic when your world feels like it's crumbling. But that emphasis on self-care and just feeling the feelings makes so much sense. Are there other immediate do's or don'ts that people often overlook in that initial chaos?
Yes, there are. Do try to speak with your partner about the infidelity. You generally have a right to the information you need to make decisions. But be aware that knowing every single detail might not always be useful. It can sometimes cause more pain. And also understand your partner might not have all the answers or might not be truthful initially.
Right, manage expectations there.
A really powerful tool is to start writing a journal. Just getting your feelings down on paper. It helps release that unwanted bitterness and resentment that can otherwise consume you.
Like letting off steam privately.
Exactly. And when it comes to children, this is vital. Do reassure them they will be okay. But don't burden them with the adult details or try to discredit your partner to them.
Must be so hard, but so important.
It is. You want your children to know and love both parents, despite any mistakes made. Protect their relationship with both of you, if possible.
That's vital advice. What else?
Absolutely. A big don't is don't play the blaming game. It's just wasted energy. In most situations, there are two sides to the story. It usually takes two people to get into and out of love.
So that includes blaming yourself or the third party too?
Yes. Blaming anyone doesn't really help you heal. Also, do think twice before telling absolutely everyone. Some people, even close family members, can be really unforgiving. They might hold on to grudges long after you've potentially moved past it.
Good point. Choose your confidants carefully.
Very carefully. On that note, don't try to get through this time alone. Surround yourself with genuinely positive, supportive people. And definitely seek professional support therapy, counseling if you need it.
Don't isolate yourself.
No. And finally, a really important one. Don't get into a retaliatory affair or jump into a new relationship too quickly. Recognize you're vulnerable right now. Safeguard your emotions during this highly sensitive period.
That's all incredibly practical advice for the immediate aftermath, but it still leaves that huge, often agonizing question hanging in the air. But why? Why does this happen?
The why.
We know there's no simple answer, right? It could be a symptom of existing relationship problems, maybe something unaddressed, or it could even relate to something in the unfaithful partner's past, couldn't it?
That's right.
And sometimes people unconsciously pull a third party into the situation, these triangular relationships, almost as a way to keep underlying issues in the original relationship buried.
Exactly. It's a way of avoiding the core problems. When we look at motivations, there are typically three kinds of forces at play. First, there are forces that kind of pull people toward affairs. This could be attraction based on things like power, admiration, companionship, or just pure sexual chemistry. There's also the excitement, the thrill of the risk, maybe curiosity, or that intoxicating feeling of falling in love again.
The pull factors. Okay.
Second, there are forces that push individuals toward affairs. This might be a desire to escape something in the current relationship or to fill perceived gaps. Boredom can be a factor. Sometimes, believe it or not, a subconscious need for punishment.
Really? Punishment?
Sounds strange, but yes.
Yeah.
Also, a need to prove one's attractiveness or boost self-worth, or just a profound desire for attention that they feel they're not getting.
The push factors. And the third,
And finally, we can't ignore societal factors. We see these influences everywhere, don't we? Media often glamorizes affairs, there's public fascination with scandals, and that ever-present sex sells message in marketing. It sort of normalizes it in a way.
so it's rarely just one single thing, but more often a complex mix of these pull factors, push factors, and these broader societal influences. It's definitely not as black and white as people might think.
Absolutely not. And sometimes knowing the type of infidelity can offer a little more clarity, though of course it never excuses the act itself. We've identified various kinds. For instance, there's the curiosity affair, often driven by boredom or seeking excitement. There's the unintended affair, where maybe attraction just develops unexpectedly, perhaps at work.
Happens all the time.
Then you have the retaliative affair, which is motivated purely by revenge, trying to even the score. There's the empty nest affair, sometimes stemming from loneliness after children leave home, or even the out-the-door affair.
What's that one?
That's essentially using the affair as an excuse to leave the relationship. Sometimes they might even leave clues, wanting to be discovered quickly, to force the end.
Wow. It really drives home the point that no one is immune to this, does it? There's this common myth that affairs only happen in bad or unhealthy relationships.
But that's simply not true.
Right. It happens in both healthy and unhealthy partnerships. Research shows it's maybe more common in couples who had brief courtships.
Interesting.
And tends to be a bit more prevalent in people in their 20s and then again in their 40s. Also, interestingly, it happens more when one or both partners work really long hours.
Proximity and opportunity perhaps play a role there.
And often with coworkers, friends, sometimes even family members.
And when we look at how common it is, well, conservative estimates suggest around 60% of men and 40% of women will have an extramarital affair at some point.
60 and 40%, that's huge.
It is. And when you consider this includes both marital and other committed relationships, there's compelling evidence that the incidence is actually increasing. Sometimes just understanding how common affairs are, knowing how many others are going through or have gone through the same thing, can help alleviate some of those feelings of isolation or personal failure. It gives a bit more perspective.
That makes sense. It doesn't lessen the pain, but maybe reduces the shame or feeling like you're the only one. So let's talk about the ripple effect. Who else gets caught in the wake of infidelity? Who else is impacted beyond the couple, and what are their unique challenges?
Oh, the ripples are wide. Betrayal affects so many people. First, let's consider the betrayer. They often live in secrecy for a while, becoming quite adept at hiding their actions. But once discovered, they often face profound shame, guilt, maybe despair, certainly confusion. They're frequently forced into making a quick decision between two relationships, and that choice brings immense consequences, including many of the same losses experienced by the person they betrayed.
The power dynamics shift dramatically too, I imagine.
Instantly, they can lose power, control, and might face severe repercussions or punishment from their partner. Then there's the lover, the third party.
What happens to them?
Well, while some affairs do lead to new, lasting relationships, a significant number don't. Statistics show about half of romantic affairs end in divorce or separation from the original partner. And even for those affairs that do lead to marriage with the lover, a staggering 75% of those subsequent marriages end in divorce.
Wow, those are sobering numbers.
They are. The lover often suffers in silence too, especially since the relationship was hidden. And of course, if there are children involved, their lives are instantly changed.
Yeah.
They experience emotional and behavioral reactions. It's very rare for children not to be affected, either indirectly or directly. They often find themselves starting a totally new lifestyle, maybe shuttling between two homes.
Such a huge upheaval for them.
Absolutely. And lastly, of course, there's the person who has been betrayed. As we've discussed, they typically experience several stages, very similar to the stages of grieving any major loss. And this process, it can take time, anywhere from several weeks to several years.
Understanding those stages could really help someone gauge their own progress, couldn't it? Help them feel like what they're experiencing is, well, part of a process. What are they?
Indeed. The first stage is often denial. Right after discovering the affair, there's that initial shock. You might find yourself making excuses or only believing what you want to hear. It's a coping mechanism, really.
Trying to protect yourself from the reality.
Exactly. It's normal, unless it goes on for too long. Then often comes intense anger. When the full impact hits home, pure rage can set in. This anger might be directed squarely at the betrayer, or it might get displaced onto others, children, colleagues, even God. It's a really difficult stage to navigate, and sometimes, sadly, it can even lead to violence in relationships that were previously nonviolent.
That's a really sobering thought. And after the anger starts to subside, what comes next?
Following anger, there's usually bargaining. This is where decision-making starts to creep in. One or both partners might start looking at negotiations. These bargains can be with each other. If you take me back, I'll never do it again. Or even bargains with oneself or with a higher power. If this works out, I promise I'll, the kind of thing.
Trying to regain some control, maybe?
Perhaps. Then comes depression. This is when the reality of the affair and its implications really sinks in. You start confronting the problems in the relationship, whether you think they can be worked out or not. Either way, you grieve for the relationship that once was. That simpler, affair-free version. Depression often feels like this heavy cloud hanging over you, making it hard to function. It needs careful monitoring, and professional help should definitely be sought if it feels persistent or deep.
Absolutely. And the final stage.
The final stage is acceptance. True acceptance arrives when you can function normally again, and the incident is acknowledged for what it was, in its entirety. For many people, reaching acceptance involves forgiving all parties involved, including themselves. Forgiveness here is about freeing yourself from those negative feelings tied to the infidelity, allowing you to move forward.
But acceptance doesn't require forgiveness, right?
That's a really important distinction, yes. While forgiveness can be a powerful part of healing for some, acceptance is not dependent on it. You can accept that it happened and learn to live with it without necessarily forgiving the actions.
Okay, that clarifies things. So once the immediate shock is processed, you've started coping using some of those strategies. What's next? This feels like where the rubber meets the road. What are the paths forward long term?
Right. Essentially, there are three main paths people find themselves on after the dust settles a bit. For some, option one is to basically ignore the affair. We touched on this earlier. This sometimes happens with older couples or those very focused on keeping the family unit intact for the children, where leaving just feels inconceivable. It might seem simpler just to push the affair to the back of their mind and carry on.
But does that actually work?
Rarely will. No action doesn't usually promote self-growth or truly help the relationship heal. The betrayer might feel they got away with it and could have repeated affairs, or they might live with chronic guilt. The betrayed person might deal with it privately but find ways to covertly punish the betrayer, which creates this unhealthy power shift. Thankfully, the shock of discovery usually is a catalyst for change, meaning few genuinely choose this path long-term without any adjustments.
Okay, so ignoring it isn't ideal. What if the relationship just feels fundamentally broken?
Well, that leads to option two. The relationship ends. And a significant number of relationships, maybe around 1/3, do terminate after an affair is discovered. Sometimes the decision rests entirely with the betrayer. They might have used the affair as an exit strategy, leaving the betrayed person with no choice but to grieve the loss and move on.
That's incredibly difficult.
It is. Other times, the betrayed person is the one who ends the relationship, often based on their deeply held beliefs and values about fidelity and trust. These values, often learned from family, teachers, past experiences, really influence whether someone feels they can accept or forgive infidelity. It's helpful sometimes to reflect on your own upbringing and past experiences with trust and betrayal to understand where your own lines are.
When a relationship ends like this, it must bring a whole new set of practical and emotional challenges. How do people navigate that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge adjustment. One common problem people face is, how do you turn off your love? You might feel intense hatred, but often that's anger directed at the behavior, not necessarily the whole person you once loved.
The person you thought they were.
Exactly. If the affair continues, seeing that person act in ways inconsistent with who you loved can sometimes, ironically, make it easier to fall out of love. Putting physical and emotional distance can help. Sometimes, much later, a functional friendship might even be possible, but not always.
What about kids, if they're involved?
Sole parenting or co-parenting after separation is a big one. The ideal goal is for children to know and have a relationship with both parents, despite the mistakes made. Children will likely experience some behavioral problems as they adjust to two homes, new routines, but these are usually temporary if handled well. Parents really need to prioritize the children's needs, shield them from conflict, and be sensible adults about sharing roles responsibly.
Easier said than done sometimes, I imagine.
Very much so. Then there's the challenge of changing roles. Separation often means dividing assets, which can lead to heavier financial burdens for both parties, often requiring both to return to work or work more. Women might re-enter the workforce, adding a provider role to being a mother. Fathers might need to take on more nurturing responsibilities than before. Both have to adjust to increased demands, often with less income.
And the loneliness.
And finally, yes, loneliness. This is almost universally felt, even if the split feels like the right decision, even if you have lots of friends. It's okay, even necessary, to allow for sad days. But the advice generally is to actively combat it. Surround yourself with supportive friends, keep busy, maybe join clubs or groups, get physically active. The key is finding a determination to learn and grow from the experience, not just dwell on the loss.
That's a lot to process if a relationship ends.
Yeah.
But what if? What if there's a chance to salvage it? That sounds like a monumental task, but maybe also an incredible opportunity for transformation.
It absolutely can be. This is option 3. The relationship is reassessed and resumed. Infidelity doesn't have to be the end. Instead, it can serve as a big wake-up call, highlighting that something was seriously wrong. If both partners can identify the underlying problems and commit to developing new skills and ways of relating, they have a good chance of not just surviving, but actually forging a stronger, more improved relationship than before.
But it takes serious commitment from both sides.
Absolutely. Non-negotiable commitment. The affair must end. Completely. No contact whatsoever. Sometimes this might even mean drastic steps like relocation or job changes if the affair was, say, with a coworker.
Wow, that's serious commitment. So once the affair is definitively over, what's the blueprint for rebuilding? How does that work start?
Well, healing also involves both partners doing significant individual work. The betrayer needs to look deeply at their internal motivations for the affair, not just blaming external circumstances or the relationship itself, what was going on inside them. And importantly, the betrayed person also needs to do some self-reflection, looking at their own emotional needs and honestly considering their part not in causing the affair. That's crucial. It's not about blame, but acknowledging any shortcomings in the relationship dynamic. Were they too busy, tired, emotionally unavailable, disinterested?
So it's about both people understanding their own contributions to the relationship climate before the affair.
Exactly. It's about both people being honest enough to acknowledge their roles in the dynamic and forthright enough to ask for their needs to be met going forward. This leads directly into developing healthy communication, setting aside regular dedicated time just to talk and, more importantly, to listen. Learning to truly hear and try to understand each other's perspectives even when it's difficult.
That sounds fundamental.
It is. And once that communication starts flowing better, then you can begin to negotiate a renewed relationship. This often involves setting new rules or boundaries, things like total transparency about movements for a while, agreeing on dedicated time together, maybe planning regular weekly outings or holidays just for the two of you, reinvesting.
It sounds like a very structured, intentional process. Is there sort of a roadmap or checklist for this healing journey together?
Yes. There's a useful 8-step framework often suggested for healing. Let's run through them quickly. First, acknowledge the infidelity. It happened. It can't be ignored or minimized. It must be dealt with head on. Second, end the affair. We've stressed this completely, utterly, no contact. Third, talk about emotional needs, both betrayer's unmet needs that might have contributed without excusing, and critically, the betrayed person's need for reassurance, security, and validation now.
Okay, acknowledgement, ending it, talking needs. What's fourth?
Fourth, give of yourself. This means concrete actions, behavior changes. Both partners need to actively show they value the relationship and each other through their efforts and creativity. Show, don't just tell. Fifth, restore trust. This is gradual and requires consistent transparency, honesty, reliability. Things like letting your partner know your whereabouts, being open with communication for as long as it takes.
That takes time, I imagine.
A lot of time and patience. Sixth, make some changes. This could mean letting go of old burdens or resentments unrelated to the affair, or finding new enjoyable hobbies or activities to pursue together, creating new positive associations. Seventh, reconnect. Actively make time to talk, reminisce about shared positive memories from before the affair, and importantly, start planning for a wonderful future together again. Rebuild that shared vision.
That sounds hopeful. And the final step, number 8.
The 8th step is forgive. As we discussed, holding on to resentment is ultimately unhealthy for the person holding it. Forgiveness, in this context, is presented as a conscious decision. It's a decision to free yourself from the heavy burden of resentment so you can move ahead in your life, whether you stay together or not. Think of it like a weight you're carrying. Forgiveness is choosing to put that weight down,
Not for the other person necessarily, but for yourself.
Precisely. It's for your own peace and ability to move forward. It doesn't mean condoning what happened or forgetting it, but rather releasing yourself from the negative emotional grip of the event.
This has been an incredibly thorough, deep dive into what is, for so many, a profoundly challenging human experience. We've really explored the shifting definitions, the raw feelings, the complex reasons why affairs happen, and the very real, though difficult, paths forward.
It's clear, isn't it? The impact of infidelity is just huge. It takes people on this unfamiliar journey through so many losses, painful feelings, stages of grief, and incredibly difficult decisions. We've looked at the types and prevalence, the consequences for everyone involved, all with the hope of gaining some meaning and understanding. We've identified strategies to help alleviate the stress and talked about how important support is. It is, it's a journey you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy, frankly. But the good news, the hopeful message here, is that people can recover. Healing is possible.
And maybe a final thought for our listeners. No matter which path you find yourself on after discovering infidelity or which path you ultimately choose, the ultimate goal isn't just about survival. It's about embarking on becoming everything you want to be, perhaps even forging a better, more honest relationship than before, or becoming a stronger, more resilient version of yourself if you move forward alone.
That's beautifully put, and if any of this deep dive has resonated deeply with you, please know that there are many resources, books, therapists, and support groups out there available to guide and support you on this journey. You don't have to go through it alone.